Prayers. O God, you are our shelter in every storm. In difficulty, you are our rock. In uncertainty, you are our anchor. In peril, you are our shield. In times of battle, you are our sword. Be with us today as a nation. Be with us today as a people. Be with us today in these times as a small island developing state seeking to navigate spaces that are not welcoming. For you, Lord, have been our guide for past 300 years, and we relied on you then, and we rely on you now. Show your face and favor to all who lead this country in positions of government, in positions of business, in positions of civil society, and across the homes of this land. Bless us as a people, Lord, as we hold you up as the only true God. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all now and forevermore. Amen. The Honourable, the Senate is now in session.
Madam President, minutes of the meeting held on Wednesday, the 10th of June, 2026, to be deferred.
So moved. Question is that the minutes of June 10th, 2026 be now deferred. All honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Messages from His Excellency, the President. Announcements by Your Honor, the Deputy President.
In terms of announcements, I have messages of lateness for His Honor, the President, the Leader of Government Business, Senator Cummins, the Most Honourable Jerome Walcott, and messages of, and Senator Dr. Rogers. There is a notice of absence for Senator Walters.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers.
Madam President, to be laid is the annual reports of the audited financial statements of the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. for the years ended March 31st, 2021 and March 31st, 2022.
Reports from select committees, questions to ministers, request for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries, personal explanations, Motions relating to the business or citizens of the Senate moved by Minister. Introduction of bills. Public business.
Consequent upon the amendment to the Constitution, 53A 1A of 2025, we have from the other place two honourable ministers, the Honourable Michael Ashley, Minister of Legal Affairs and Criminal Justice, and the Honourable Gregory Nichols, Acting Attorney General.
Order number 2, ma'am. In the name of the Honourable Minister of Legal Affairs and Criminal Justice, to move the second reading of the Supreme Court of Judicature Amendment Bill 2026.
Public business is now the order of the day. Honourable Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to move this amendment to the Supreme Court of Judicature Act, Cap 117A, to increase the number of judges in the High Court, to establish a firearms division of the High Court, and to provide for related matters. I just want to simply say that this is the establishment of a gun court in Barbados for the first time. Through putting a firearm division in the present system that we have, given the fact that we have other divisions, the family division and the criminal division and the commercial division and civil division that we have. Now, Madam President, I want to say that this amendment not only is a historic one, but is indeed an important amendment to the existing law. The only jurisdiction that I can speak of in the Caribbean that have a gun court is Jamaica and Bahamas, sorry. Bahamas. I did look at Bahamas, but I recognize that they do have some differences, but I joined Bahamas too. The 1974 Act of Jamaica established their gun court. Persons who were law students, and in the case of Hines, will recognize that this gun court was discussed in that established case, locus classicus as we will call it. Now, we must ask ourselves, why a gun court? And the statement of the Chief Justice at the time in Jamaica will give evidence as to why they established a gun court. And Madam President, with your indulgence, I will make this a document of the court as soon as possible. Of the House, sorry. I'm taking that in court. My apologies. Calling gun court and then calling gun court, so I must say chamber next thing. Respectfully, Madam President. And this is what the President of the Court of Appeal in Jamaica said. It is a matter of general public knowledge that in recent years, crimes of violence against firearms, unlicensed or illegally obtained, were used and to cause grave public concern and indeed alarm. Goes on to say that persons were shot and killed by day and by night in the course of robbery, rape, and other offenses, or for no apparent reasons. Witnesses for the Crown at the trial of persons accused of such crimes were often intimidated. Victims of crime themselves were not infrequently killed or shot, at most probably with a view to their elimination, as eyewitnesses who could testify against the perpetrators of those crimes. We went on to say even counsel for the Crown on one case was not immune from an attack by the use of a firearm. Intimidation and attack did not come only from the offender, it came from associates of the offender, especially where the offender was a member of a gang. They established their gun court. And the difference between their gun court and what we are establishing now is that they adopted to use judge-alone trials. Judge-alone trials. That is before the jury. We have that in Barbados, but it's optional. All hearings in the Jamaica court were held in camera. And the names of witnesses and their personal information were kept confidential and not published. So we model our court after their court. But the difference is that we are not going only with judge-alone trials, we are going with an option. So the accused man, he has an option. He can elect to have a judge-alone trial, or he can elect to have a trial by jury, which of course many defense lawyers would like. But I'm still of the view that judge-alone trials move cases more swiftly through the system rather than trial by jury. Now, the Firearms Act is really the important act that really deals with firearm offenses. Simple possession of firearm and ammunition too. Other firearm-related offenses. But I can say that before a magistrate had jurisdiction to deal with firearm offenses, the magistrate also had the jurisdiction to grant bail. The magistrate had jurisdiction to give a fine for ammunition and again simple possession of firearm. But I recall that in a noted case in Barbados called Jerome Bovell and the Queen, there was a discussion on the history of the Firearm Act and also sentencing. But it was only in 1998 that Sir David Simmons, he was then Attorney General, made an amendment to the Firearms Act and moved the jurisdiction from out of the Magistrates Court to the High Court. So you had to go to the High Court to get bail, even if you had one rung of ammunition. If you had 2 rungs of ammunition. If you had 3 rungs of ammunition. Possession of firearm, you have to apply to the High Court, and still is, as the law is now, for bail. The Act was also amended and placed some very strict penalties in 1998 Amendment to the Firearms Act. The Act, some might say, resulted in a slide down in criminal activity at the time. Because the reason why the Act was amended, because of the increase in firearm offenses and very serious crimes in relation to firearms. Now, we too, in the early 2000s, the further amendments were made. And only recently in 2025 an amendment was made to the Firearms Act. The definition of a firearm. The fact that if you commit or if you are found guilty and that you had a conviction before, that a custodial sentence is the only sentence that you should really get. Now, I want to say to this chamber that out of the 27 murders for this year from January until now, 23 of those murders were caused by the use of firearms. From January until now, the police service was able to collect 51 illegal firearms off the streets. 51. 51 illegal firearms means that there are cases to be done, cases to be fast-tracked, cases to be tried. And do we believe that the existing criminal justice system, with the courts existing, can handle these matters? Further, I can also say that the year 2025, crave indulgence, when we look at the amount of firearms that the police service was able to take off the streets, 83 firearms and 3,309 rounds of illegal ammunition. That's for the year 2025. Of course, this also speaks to cases too that are pending within the existing criminal justice system. Now, my readings inform me, our research inform me, that the gun court in Jamaica assisted in the backlog of cases, reducing the backlog of cases. Now, there will be two firearms, well, let me say gun courts being established. One to deal with the backlog, and one to deal with the present cases from January until now. I've heard some practitioners speaking out. I only listen to two of them because I don't think arguments from the other two will move me in any way whatsoever. But I'm saying that we should not worry about how we should get this case fast-tracked, because it is a specialized court. Already, we have permission, in fact, we got the permission, that it will be staffed by 2 judges. Judges outside the existing criminal justice system. Judges that will have time to deal with these matters. Further, 2 legal assistants outside the criminal justice system, 4 marshals, 4 probation officers, because 2 in each court. And the reason why we are putting these dedicated probation officers and dedicated legal assistants to the court is because that upon conviction, in accordance with the Penal System Reform Act as amended, you have to prepare a pre-sentence report. The probation office as it is already stretched. I have suggested that if a man is found guilty, if a man is charged with a possession of firearm, the possession of a firearm, and up till from the time he is arrested, skipper, I want to plead guilty. From the time there, the pre-sentence report should kick in. Get the ball rolling. So that when we get to High Court, you don't have to adjourn and wait for a pre-sentence report. And that is probably a way of easing the backlog too. Because a pre-sentence report is a standard form. I think the clerk of the chamber will know, because he had experience as a prosecutor. Got some blows though. And then decided to come here. That's a joke, by the way, sir. He was a good prosecutor. And so if you decide, look, Skipper, I ain't got no defense. I get fined with the gun in my hand. I ain't got nothing, the fingerprints there and everything. Start the ball rolling. Get the probation officer to do the inquiry report. Start so that when you get up, by the time you get up to High Court, you're ready to go. Now, people would ask questions, or people would ask questions. But you're establishing a gun court. How many files are ready? How many cases are ready? But I'm happy to report to this chamber that the employment of a consultant with members of the prosecution department of the Royal Barbados Police Service, the Barbados Police Service, I can say that 672 files have been submitted to the police prosecutors. This is indeed impressive. In fact, this actually surpassed what was done before. Of all the files between 2022 and 2024, 672 files already. I can say to you also that in order to have the court up and being operational, you have to feed it. It can't be just there sitting. You have to feed it. And my accurate and certain information is that the court that will be dealing with firearm offenses from January until now, I am happy to report to this chamber that for January, there were 4 cases and all the files are ready. The disclosure was served on all parties interested in matters before the court. In February, cases again ready for prosecution. In March, we had about 3 cases and they're still ready, and they're ready now for prosecution. April, again, 11 cases, and they're also ready with respect to disclosure and respect to statements. In May, cases are ready. And for the benefit of those who, of course, who are not part of the profession, when they talk about disclosures, I mean file ready. All the statements are ready. Ready for prosecution and ready to go trial. Trial ready. They're trial ready. So it's not sitting, the 2 courts will not be sitting there. The files are ready. As I said, we've already looked. And we've also included in the gun court 4 prosecutors. 4 prosecutors that be ready to prosecute these matters, that can hit the ground running, that will not have to be trained. Yes, they will have to be trained in some instances, but they can hit the ground running. And this court will be, these 2 courts will be ready. The stakeholders, normally the DPP and the courts, they have endorsed the position, our position, in relation to the establishment of 2 gun courts. And the DPP, they have said, you know what? We do need 2 specialized gun courts for reason of, 1, that is a higher respect to firearm offenses in High Court. 2, we have to address the backlog of firearm cases. 3, the length of time it takes to have cases ready. And 4, a growing number of people who want to exempt themselves for jury duty. This is the DPP saying, supporting this. The important stakeholder in this gun court. You know, I always say, and I will continue to say, that a man who is charged with possession of a firearm, or a man who's charged with possession of ammunition, that case should not take more than 6 months to go to high court, from charge to committal to arraignment and to trial. And the reason I say that is because, one, the police officer who's arrested, we need his statement. Secondly, the officer who was present, we might need him. 3, the ballistic experts. 4, the keeper of records. And 5, if the man elect to give a statement, or don't elect to give a statement, that's all you need. So the 5 statements, crucial statements that you need in the prosecution of any gun offense. 5 crucial statements. And that is why the Prime Minister, Honourable Prime Minister, stated that these days are now over. And that a man who is on bail for possession of a firearm, possession of ammunition, or firearm-related offense will not feel good if he knows that his case is called up within 4 or 5 months. Because speedy trials result in the reduction of criminal activity. And that if you have a speedy trial, you get dangerous offenders off the street. And that secondly, you also endorse and respect his rights to a trial within reasonable time without delay. And thirdly, it's also respecting the victim's rights, because the victim wants is there all night in court. Because sometimes you both down there at the court in night time, waiting on the jury to come back. Sometimes 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the night. So, the aspect of speedy trials in a gun court is important. The fact too, and the Prime Minister raised an important point. And she indicated that having already overburdened the DPP's office, that it would be important to establish a unit in the DPP's office to deal with backlog cases. It's important. Extremely important. And you know, where you got my bill? When you go to the legislation, when you go to the legislation, the act in itself really endorses speedy trials. Section 27, C subsection 1. It states, section 28, right? We deal with section 28. My apologies. Section 28. This is what it says. A magistrate before whom any case involving a firearm offense is brought shall forthwith transfer such case for trial by the firearms court, and the records should be endorsed accordingly but no objections to any proceedings shall be taken or allowed on the ground that any case has not been transferred. So for the first time in a piece of legislation, the legislation is placing an obligation and an onus on a judicial officer to transfer a case forthwith to the High Court. But I always wonder why, when I appear, sometimes pro bono, in a matter involving a firearm offense, and my learned friend, Senator Allen, will agree with me on this. That he don't practice? I realize the other age, he's very critical. He don't deal with that stuff at all. But it's simple. If I appear before a magistrate and the magistrate do not have jurisdiction to grant bail, you only can remand for 28 days? So does it make sense? Would it make sense to transfer the case immediately to the High Court to start the trial process? We just go in there to get remand for 28 days? I always wonder about it. So this section, dealing with referral, places a strict obligation on the magistrate to look, no delays, no adjournments, transferred forthwith to the High Court judge. See, Senator Benjamin is looking at me, but it, of course, is in the amendment. Say it will have to be put into operation. Any strong defense lawyer will raise it and say, but you know, I want my trial to go up quickly. And according to section so you have to transfer this. No, you can't delay it. So I think this is an important change in the law, because it's now saying, look, these have to move. They have to move with speed throughout the system. Now, the same section also speaks further down, recognizes that a judge can sit without a jury or not. And let me say this, that what I believe we need to put in place now, and in hope that is done very shortly, that those persons who are on remand without bail and that they're charged for a firearm-related offense should indicate through the channels of the prison and to the deputy departments of their intention of making an early guilty plea. Once that is done, that too will cut down in the backlog and move trials through the gun court as quickly as possible. A man on remand might want to say, you know, I want to throw in the towel early o'clock, as you would call it. I say up front, I want to throw in the towel. I want to plead guilty. Further, I think that to me, that section is one of the important sections of this bill. Indeed, an important section of this bill. And I will say, speaking subject to correction, this is the first time I've seen a clause placed in a bill placing obligation on the judicial officer to, without delay, send this case up to the firearms court or to a particular court. The first time. Now, further, we have, as this Grand Court act was passed in the other house, some lawyers came out and they made the point again. Why you have this court? Why you don't fix the system? No sort of solutions whatsoever, no. No sort of solutions whatsoever. Just talking. No sort of solution whatsoever. Nobody ain't come or went to the press and say, look, this is how we can get rid of the backlog. Nobody ain't come and say that, no. Just talking, criticizing. And I hope that the person who replied to me will come with some solutions. What? I hope so. I'm not anticipating your speech, man. Not anticipating. I'm just saying that I know that you will come with solutions today. We put it that way. Said the walker don't come here and interfere with but seriously, and we must put things on the table to deal with the backlog, because the criminal justice system is an important tool and component in the pursuit of justice. And that is someone to come and say to me, one of the lawyers to come and say to me, look, you know what? You see the offense of indecent assault. That moves some of those matters to the magistrate so the magistrate can deal with it. The indecent assault matters that involve minors, leave them at High Court. The offense of escaping lawful custody is a common law offense, the magistrate deal with it, rather than coming up to the High Court with a judge and jury. Criminal deception, another offense. Counterfeit. Am I having counterfeit money and all that? Well, you go up there to the High Court with a jury, let the magistrate deal with it. Nobody come and say, look, establish an early guilty plea system. That person who wants to plead guilty within the system, come on this day. Now the lawyers say that they just criticize, but no solutions whatsoever. So I give them some solutions, and they can go home and study it for homework. But let me say this, that we must also, in this fight in relation to firearm offenses, we must also strengthen the stakeholders. And the police service is an important part, or an important stakeholder in this pursuit of getting firearms off the streets. But they just want the guns off the streets. Any way that can assist the gun court that can have no speedy trials, Barbadians will support it. And that supporting the Barbados Police Service is important. And that the increase in ballistic experts and the use of technology, because I can tell you that in my experience, that cases are really delayed because of the ballistics experts being stretched and not having the time to prepare the reports and to prepare the findings. So, I can tell you that the forensic lab that is about to be established again and reopened will be working with the police service to enhance the technology, enhance their capabilities in relation to firearms matters, in relation to investigations, in relation to evidence gathering. And that's important too. We know that this is the problem. And whatever the police service need, it's important that we assist them. If they need enhanced surveillance in certain spots, if they need to step up patrols, whatever is necessary, we have to give them. Even if we have to develop and further enhance community policing, because community policing is important too, because you develop a relationship with the streets. And that is one of the easiest ways of building up a relationship with the community, and it also assists in evidence gathering. Intelligence. Somebody would come, I know the community police officer, because you build that element of trust. And you say, you know what, I can afford to tell him something, because I know he ain't gonna come back and harm me. I don't intend to speak for a long time. But when, again, we speak about the police prosecution department, when we speak about case management, that is where it starts. It starts there. And the police prosecution department, it starts there. And if you don't put system in place to ensure that we can move these cases quickly, then we are not serving any purpose. I mentioned before that a gun case shouldn't take that long. But I can say to this chamber that there will be criminal procedure rules coming very shortly. I've been informed that the rules are ready. The Enabling Act is also ready. And that these rules place obligations on the prosecution, the defense, and whether you are not represented, to ensure that your case is ready and that the files are ready. And not even the magistrate. Those rules will be coming shortly. So all the talk about lawyers saying, look, there can be delays, there can be backlog. With the criminal procedure rules coming, all those things finished. All that things finished. Right, Senator Benjamin? You were outstanding criminal defense lawyer. Came from good chambers. And you would agree with me. You're nodding your head. I know you agree with me. I didn't know the independent senator. She's laughing already. Would agree with me too. I can't say. Let me leave that. I can't say. I won't say. But to point out, because I know that, I know that today we were here, there's a backlog of cases. How are we going to move the justice system forward? How are we going to move it forward when all these things are being put in place now? And I could also say to this chamber that the piece of legislation that was passed last year, the plea bargaining legislation, that piece of legislation has impacted significantly on the backlog of cases in the criminal justice system. And you know why I say that? Because in cases where you have 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 accused men, that a trial for 6 or 7 accused men will last about 7 or 8 or 10 weeks. I did a case one time where we had 11 men in St. Lucie charged for rape. Started in November and ended 2 days before Christmas. Couldn't even buy a Christmas gift.
You were glad for that.
It's too late. It's too late. I must say that, but of course, I got my gifts though. But to get the gifts was an issue because justice was important at the time, and they had to pay some very important, make some important submissions in that same case. But that is an example. So if we had the plea bargaining legislation at the time, I can draw an example to you. We know that rape is the penetration of the penis or any other object in the vagina. Yeah, that's it. But one of the accused men was unable to penetrate. And the chief magistrate at the time, Ian Weeks, he was a defense attorney, and he made a submission, and the case got the case got reduced, but the case still carried on for all those weeks. The reason I'm saying it is because the plea bargaining legislation, that if a man is charged with murder with 7 other men or firearm offense, and decide that I want to take an option of either turning state witness, or I want to take a plea bargain and go for a lesser offense, that's happening now. So that legislation is so impactful that it has impacted positively on the criminal justice system in terms of backlogs. And I've already said that, you know, the High Court sometimes can be intimidating, and sometimes the intimidation will cause witnesses not to come, accused man not to come. But in terms of witnesses, we don't have to worry about witnesses coming and giving evidence in matters like these. Because very shortly, the Criminal Procedures Act will proclaim to bring special measures to assist and to preserve witnesses' identity and to ensure that they can give their evidence to ensure either a successful prosecution or even a successful acquittal. Because I'm not here as a prosecutor, I'm not here, I have to stand in the middle respectfully. Now, we know that we have to deal with how these guns get into the country. And we don't manufacture guns in Barbados. We have now to look at our ports of entry. We have to give all those who work in those areas, strengthen their capacity, improve the technology, and improve surveillance at those entries, points of entries. And we must also build back that trust with the community so we can get the buy-in, so that persons will not turn a blind eye to a man or a woman who's in possession of a firearm, but refuse to report it. Refuse to report it to the authorities. And that's why we need a whole nation approach. A whole nation approach, community leaders, entertainers too. Senator Slocum, you're an entertainer. You saw my talent. I didn't see the senator coming here today. You know that I recognize that. Huh? I behaving myself today. What happened to you? Behaving myself, Mr. Nicholas. Madam President, Mr. Learning Friend is trying to keep me in check in relation to matters outside of these chambers, and I will so do. I will so do.
Please tell him it's not necessary for him to take over the role of the chair.
I don't think he's taking over the role of the chair. I think he was pulling me back. Respectfully, man. He was pulling me back. But I want to end, by the statement made by Sir David Simmons and his Attorney General at the time, in the case of Jerome O'Neill Bovell and the Queen. This is what he said. There's no right for ordinary citizens of Barbados to bear arms. There's no right. It has been totally against the culture and social norms of this country for persons to have and use unlicensed firearms. He said possession of a firearm is only legal if the holder has a valid license entitling him to use it or to carry it. He said firearms engender a sense of fear in citizens, and their fear of crime is heightened sometimes to the point of hysteria. He said the unlawful possession and use of firearms is a grave source of danger to society. They can and are used to take life, cause injury, and further the commission of other offenses. That's what he said. And he spoke about gangs, too. And he spoke about gangs. And what I have recognized, too, is that a lot of these persons who are charged with possession of firearms between the ages of 16 and 25, that is their first offense. First offense. And the question is, once the matter is finished, how we can reintegrate this young man or woman back into society? Back into society. Let's tease her. Let's tease her. She didn't say it to the chamber that she's going to say. No. Right. So, how do we reintegrate these young offenders that have committed a serious offense to the first thing, that of possession of firearm, possession of ammunition, or shooting and causing endangering life? All of those offenses, how do we get them back into society? How do we get them back? I know my learning friend will speak to that. Not me, Minister. How do we get them back into society? How do we monitor these young offenders? You know, I had a magistrate act, or he says, that when you appear before him, I think it was Magistrate Bank. And when you come before him for the first time of a big matter, he will say, this is a test match. This is an ordinary match. This is a test match, so we got to deal with this. And we have to wonder, why would a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, what do you even want with a gun? You have to ask yourself that. And so we are losing some of our, we are losing our young men. Because you take a first offender, he goes on remand, And of course, when it becomes to sentencing even that first offender, based on the law, the St. Jerome, Beverly Queen, that his age and first time can be used as an exceptional circumstance to give him a non-custodial sentence. First thing. But we still have to monitor him, because he or she will know where the gun and the ammunition comes from. But there's another link to that too. 6-year-old boy is not working, 7-year-old boy not working, unemployed. Who will pay the fine? So the mother now, or the guardian, however, have to go and face the bank to pay sometimes $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 to make sure that he doesn't go to prison. Although there may be some view, there's a view that once he plead guilty to firearm offense, possession, that he will should be given a custodial sentence. But is that rehabilitating or reforming the offender? Is that rehabilitation? And you have to balance it. But of course, if a 16-year-old comes in with 5 guns, or 3 guns, or 4 guns, I don't think a reasonable judicial officer would grant a fine. And the fact is that our Penal System Reform Act don't even give power to a judicial officer to make one of those orders on the Penal System Reform Act. And that is the issue. But you know, I don't think I'm gypsy. I don't think I'm gypsy, but I like to take a look at how gun fines are paid in Barbados. I can tell you that a person who's fined as a punishment for a gun and what is existing now, if he has to pay $40,000 or $30,000 for a fine, the judge normally asks for forfeit part of the fine up front. And the rest to be paid within other months. It is my information that the latter part of the fines are not being paid, or that they're being paid in very small amounts. So this is what the accused, the convicted man is putting his family through now. You go to the bank, draw off $20,000 or get approval of $20,000 and pay forfeit, but then you got to pay the other $20,000 within a reasonable time. Question is, then, how do we monitor, or what do we put in place to make the system more efficient to ensure that these gun fines are paid within a reasonable time, are paid within the time stipulated by the court? Because it's a serious offense. And we must let them know by the imposition of fines and the terms of the fines that it really should be, this should be a deterrent factor in moving that young person who's a first-time offender away from the commission of further offenses. That's my view. You have a similar problem in the magistrate's court. Similar problem in the magistrate's court with traffic offenses, the collection of fines. Of course, the system that we can put in place that will move us away from the collection of fines. ticketing. Ticketing. Other technology that we can use to ensure that we collect the fines and that they go into the treasury. Because you have committed a crime against the state. You have committed a crime against the state. And so you should get your just due. It involved valuable time by the police, the court, lawyers, jurors. And given a fine, then it is your strict obligation and duty to pay that fine as stipulated by the code. That is my position. Madam President, I can say that this is a fulfillment of a manifesto promise. When they peruse the manifesto, it states a Barbados Democratic government will complete criminal justice reform through modern legislation, faster course. I talk about that. Because I know that the common debate is about delays in the system and you're moving too slow. But it's come to that. With any legislation and with the oncoming of criminal procedure rules. Fair process, swifter justice. Create a dedicated gun court to move firearm cases through the Supreme Court and strengthening deterrence. This is what we're doing here today. It is not a mere promise. And hopefully today, I am not anticipating that all senators will agree, but I believe if the whole of Barbados agree, that might be enough to persuade them to say, you know what, I have to agree to this piece of legislation today. I'm not saying that they should, but I'm saying that if the whole of Barbados, if the editors, if all Barbados people agree, that they should join hands in this fight against this serious matter that's on the streets, that's affecting families, affecting young people, causing death, and have the court system clog up. And that is why we are bringing these two gun courts to move those cases out of the existing criminal justice system. Further, to improve the terms and conditions of the important stakeholder in this fight against gun crime, the establishment of the state-of-the-art station in 2 magistrates courts and 2 magistrates court at 6 Roses St. Philip, a new Oisins police station, new Holtown police station, modern equipment at police stations, a larger substation at the Glebe in St. George, construction of a new police station at Belpain in St. Andrew. So all of these items that touch and concern the police, their terms and conditions of work, will of course improve and enhance their productivity in terms of intelligence gathering in relation to possession of these firearms. Oh, she got 4 minutes. Crave indulgence. Oh, so I want to wrap up by saying that we know that the establishment of a gun court by itself will not solve the issue of crime. We know that. And we know that some people would be tempted to get up and say that. But this is only part and parcel of the process and the program to assist in solving the crime. Country have to be involved. Communities have to be involved. Every single Barbadian must be involved. As I said, one word, I will wrap up now, one word to the entertainers. That they have a duty and responsibility to. Because they have reach and influence. And whoever that entertainer is, I know there are entertainers in here, that they hope to that they can reach their partners I hope they can reach their partners and say, look, let us come together and join in this fight against crime. Let us now look at how we can have more responsible lyrics. As I said before, I listen to Lil Rick. Lil Rick song, I love Lil Rick song. I love Master T song too. About getting the guns off the streets. I support that. I support that. And so we must know, bring those people on board, even the social media influencers too, who can reach the young people. We need to get those on board. Yeah, if you want to have a chase place, I don't know if you have a chase place. This says something about you? But, sorry, I take that back. I take it back, Madam President. I take it right back. I humbly apologize, Senator Slaughter. I humbly apologize. Humbly apologize. I didn't get in that. I'm not getting involved in that. Not getting involved in that at all. But suffice it to say, Madam President, I think that I've dealt with the legislation. My learned friend in his speech would then deal with other sections of the act. But suffice it to say, I want to repeat again to Barbados that this amendment to this legislation is indeed important and it reflects government's commitment to ensure that there's speedy justice, to ensure that there be fairness, and to ensure that this government is serious about the fight against crime, and also to transform the criminal justice system. I really want to touch on another matter because it's only last year that we had the Indian Points Declaration. In the Indian Points Declaration, after the Bar Association and the criminal justice, all the partners involved in criminal justice throughout the Caribbean met. They too recognize the importance of a faster criminal justice system. And they've declared that governments in the Caribbean should ensure and put provisions in place that our criminal justice system will be fair, transparent, and move quickly rather than at a slow pace, and that system must be put in place to erase the backlog, and we have to enhance all the stakeholders involved in the criminal justice system. That is part and parcel of the Indian Points Declaration. So, Madam President, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Senator Goodrich. I thank the Honourable Minister, and we hear Senator Goodrich.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning to all. I rise today to discuss the said bill and give my contribution on the Supreme Court of Judicature Amendment Bill of 2026, ma'am. And let me just first state that the governmental minister did cover some of the questions and queries of which I would have had in my mind. And I must say that if any Barbadian were asking for justification, then he would have covered a lot of the things that they would have questioned. Because you see, myself as opposition senator, I will always give credit, well, as independent senator, I will always give credit where it is due, and I will always keep a balanced approach. So at the outset, let me just state that I don't underestimate the threat posed to Barbadians by the illegal firearms in the country. Right now in Barbados, there is a high surge of criminal offenses and cases which involve gun-related activity. So any mother, any father who is seeing this will have a great concern, just as well as any other citizen in the country. Because we know that as long as there is a spike, there exists fear in the minds of our citizens. So when we are discussing this amendment to the bill, we are really looking at whether you really need to establish a firearm court and extend the divisions within the Supreme High Court of Barbados. Because right now, most citizens will know that there does exist the civil division, the family division, the commercial division, and we are extending by the subsection 3 of this bill, by section 3 of this bill, the divisions of the courts to include the firearm court. I don't like to call it a gun court because the word gun is not listed there in the legislation. I prefer to use the language of the legislation, which is to establish a firearm court. So, as the Governmental Minister of Legal Affairs and Criminal Justice would have just stated, he mentioned that firearms were used in 23 of the 27 murders committed this year. And that is concerning to any citizen of the country. Because if you can choose a number like that, that is a high percentage. So, Madam President, we can't change the facts because they are there. And Madam President, this discussion on having the amendment of this bill may be new to Barbados, but as alluded by the governmental minister, it exists in other territories, yes. As you mentioned, it has happened in Jamaica and the Bahamas. So now we are here discussing it in Barbados so that we can ensure that the public does not lose confidence in the justice system. I am quite comfortable with the fact that I can hear that there were, I don't have the proof, but I heard the governmental minister, they say that there was consultation with the DPP, Director of Public Prosecutions, and there were consultations, and I find that if he has consulted with the other stakeholders, that is good for society because many a time, if there's no consultation happening with the members of our society and the requisite stakeholders, then when a decision is made, then of course you will get backlash if you don't consult with those requisite parties. And we in society just want to be comfortable and know that you have done your homework. You have done that which you have to do. So, ma'am, any thoughtful and critical-minded citizen would naturally ask what justification exists for the establishment of a separate firearm division. So once that justification has been advanced, ma'am, the next and equally important question, ma'am, must be whether the objectives identified by the government could be achieved through less disruptive and more efficient means, including strengthening the existing criminal division. Because we know that there's going to be criticism in that area. Members of society, defense attorneys, prosecutors may ask that question. Why not strengthen the existing criminal division that have existed? And equally, they will also question whether, there's equality in thought, because there are other divisions that need resources that could equally state that they need more judges, that they need better technological infrastructure. So it is the government's job really to provide these solutions. But of course, as a member of society and as a senator, I will propose solutions at all times, but I do hope that the government at all times do have the requisite solutions to ensure that when they implement such measures, that those measures that are implemented to help society will run efficiently and effectively, ma'am. So the Honourable Minister of Legal Affairs had described previously firearm violence as one of the greatest challenges confronting our criminal justice system. Now, I don't know if it is the greatest of all challenges, but I can assure you that I do agree that it is a great challenge here in our society, and the challenge occurred really at a high rate under this current administration. Illegal firearms do continue to threaten public safety. It does destroy families, because we know that many families have been affected by the high spike in crime. And I would say too that the delays are very concerning, not only to the accused, but also to the witnesses. So when you have delays, for instance, and an accused is on bail, of course, we don't want that accused is out there on bail for a number of years, going up to 6 years. So speed in the justice system is necessary so that you don't have all the backlog of cases there for a very long period of time. And we, of course, wouldn't want to encourage the younger folk in the thought of thinking that they can escape from being not prosecuted and enjoy a great freedom if they really are guilty. But of course, one is always innocent until proven guilty. So, Madam President, illegal firearms really do continue to threaten public safety, and the swift justice is definitely necessary. So any responsible government, yes, will take the steps that are necessary. And I will also allude to the fact that a responsible government will also enhance their criminal division equally and any other division of the Supreme Court. And the government should solve the problems that affect society today, ma'am. So we don't have to ask whether the offenses that are gun-related are serious, or if they really create a serious problem to be merited. The mere fact that persons are using them without the requisite license is wrong and is something that needs to be addressed urgently, ma'am. So the question really here this morning is whether establishing a separate firearms division of the High Court is the best use of the resources that we have available to Barbadians, yes? So, ma'am, one of the concerns that I want to start with is really to focusing on the technology infrastructure. So that is another practical consideration which this debate has not really sufficiently addressed. I didn't really hear the government minister go deeply into technology. I know it was mentioned, but there is an issue with technology being provided properly in the courts. We have heard much about, yes, additional judges and prosecutors, ballistic experts, and support staff. And that is important because when we are talking about the establishment of a court, we have to ensure, of course, that it is properly staffed and that it has the proper structure. So yes, if you have the judicial assistants and the secretaries there and the ballistic experts, of course, we welcome that so that there wouldn't be a strain on the administration. So if we are talking about modern justice systems, we can't just look at personnel alone. They are driven by technology. And for years, I have seen that concerns have been raised by members of the bar, by litigants and judicial officers alike. I've been to the Supreme Court and I've heard judges complaining many times about the technology infrastructure. They've been saying that when they have to record the matter that certain infrastructures are not working. And we have to ensure that when this court is established, if all senators agree today and the bill is passed, that is one of the areas that will be working efficiently. We have to ensure that in these modern times, we can even use online technology. There's nothing wrong with that, because that is something that happens in the other countries, other territories, where we can have online courts. So, if the government expects firearm matters to be heard within weeks rather than years, then those judges must be equipped with the technological tools that are necessary to manage cases efficiently. A specialized firearms division will not achieve its objectives if judges are still being hampered by outdated systems, manual processes, or delays in accessing information. So by creating new structures, we must ensure that the courts themselves will be fully equipped, and I don't think that is not a fair request. I do believe that is a fair request. Ensure that the courts are fully equipped, ensure that we have the proper technological infrastructure, because we're in the 21st century. And if we're talking about modernizing legislation and we're going to have such groundbreaking legislation that would change the court structure, then we have to ensure that we're up to the time in the 21st century when it comes to the technology. So thank you. I accept the facts that yes, offenses must be prosecuted swiftly. I do agree with that. I accept that there is a great backlog of cases. I've already said I accept that. I accept that citizens deserve to feel safe, in their communities, in their homes, wherever they go in Barbados, citizens deserve to feel safe. So I will not be here standing to say, well, hey, this is a bad initiative. I've done my research. I've looked at countries. I've sat on YouTube. I've listened to debates even in California. I've looked at the debates in Jamaica. So I've done my research to see, well, look, having a firearm court division could help. But of course, wherever there is success, there's always room for criticism. And we have to get used to that in Barbados. So, I accept what the Prime Minister did say, that justice delayed does encourage crime. Because when you have someone who is accused and they are running around on the outside freely, guilty or not, sometimes these individuals do commit more crimes, even if bail is granted. And if the system is one that has much delay, we don't want there to be a case where they feel so encouraged that they can run freely and commit 4 and 5 and 6 gun-related offenses and burden this justice system. Because we already have the backlog, and the court, as you see, the court will be established to have the 2 courts. One will deal with the backlog of cases, and the other court will deal with the new matters. So the government and the opposition here, or independent senator if you call me, are largely united on the nature of the challenge to combat gun-related violence, Our issue now being debated lies in whether this bill represents the most appropriate response to the challenge, because we know the challenge. So, establishing a firearm division concentrates judicial resources on one class of offenses, yet the justice system obviously is an integrated whole. So, delays and backlogs also happens in not just criminal matters, but in family, but in commercial. It happens all across the border, yes? So if reform is justified solely on the seriousness of gun crime without a parallel evaluation of other serious offenses or the systemic causes of delay across the courts, there is a risk of creating uneven prioritization within the administration of justice. So in that sense, while it is legitimate to treat gun crime as urgent, ma'am, it is equally necessary to ask whether creating a specialized division will address the underlying structural issues, ma'am, or merely if it reallocates judicial attention in a way that may leave, ma'am, the broader systemic inequities unresolved. So, ma'am, this leads me, ma'am, to a critical part, because I know that every Barbadian who's sitting at home will ask this question. And we're asking here, how are the firearms getting into the country? And it's a critical question, because I too want to know, how are those firearms entering into Barbados? How are they getting into the hands of the young men and women who are creating these crimes and who are acquiring these firearms illegally? I want to know. I've heard debates with great deal about the consequences of the gun-related gun-related offenses, and we've heard much less commentary about the sources of the guns getting into Barbados, ma'am. So Barbados, as we acknowledge, we don't manufacture guns here. I don't know if somebody have a secret one somewhere that they know that there's a place that manufactures guns. But based on my research, we do not manufacture guns here in Barbados. So how did we get here then? How did we get to this place where so many guns are still in circulation? I heard the governmental minister mention the confiscation of 51. So we know that they are here and they are in circulation. So that should be enough to tell us, look, we have to ensure that we tighten our border security, and we need more measures in place, obviously, to get rid of these guns that are in circulation in the country. And I know that it would take all of society to assist in that area, because...
Senator, if you would just pause so that the President can come in.
Thank you.
Great, yes. Good morning, Honourable Senators. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy President, for holding the chair while I attended to important matters, giving support to the spouse of a former colleague. Please continue, Senator Goodrich.
Thank you, sir. It's always an honor and pleasure to have you here with us. And I was just alluding to talking about the root causes of the gun-related criminal offenses here in Barbados. And I was acknowledging that, look, in Barbados, sir, we don't have any manufacturing company that is selling guns. So the major question here is, how are these guns getting into the country? And that is something that must be answered, sir, because it is an important question. And also, it shows us that the major focus should be on border security and also getting rid of the guns that are in circulation. Because the focus here now is on the consequences that will happen when there are gun-related cases. But I want us to shift focus a bit and really look at the root causes of the problem, because we must get rid of the guns that are in circulation in the country. And I didn't hear the governmental minister speak very deeply on this area, as I did my research online and I did listen to him this morning very intensely. I recognize that this is one thing that I want to hear more on. I want to see more emphasis being placed on it, because as long as we have these guns in circulation still, yes, the gun court will operate and we'll be looking at the consequences of these offenses, but we must shift our focus to the root causes so we can eliminate such issues in our society. So therefore, while I understand the government's desire to establish a firearms division in the High Court, I respectfully suggest that the more fundamental questions are these. How are these weapons entering our country? What additional investments are being made in border security? What additional resources are being provided to customs, immigration, the Coast Guard, and the law enforcement agencies to intercept illegal firearms before they reach to our streets, sir? What is being implemented to ensure that police corruption does not affect the process? And let me be clear, I don't have any evidence to say that there is police corruption, but if there does exist, ma'am, then my question here is, what is being implemented to ensure that police corruption does not affect this process? Because whenever we're talking about speedy cases being tried, the police definitely is involved, the prosecution is involved, the police there sometimes catch people red-handed. So it is a fair question, ma'am. So, because, Mr. President, got me saying ma'am, sorry, sir, I was so accustomed to ma'am being there. So, Mr. President, apologies to you.
I know that your intentions are pure.
Of course. So, Mr. President, my thing is that if a tap is left running, no amount of mopping the floor will solve the problem. So if we have a tap running and I take a mop and I'm mopping the floor, the water is still there running and the problem still exists. So a firearm court deals with the consequences of gun crime. It does not prevent a single illegal firearm from entering Barbados. And we must make that clear. It doesn't prevent a single illegal firearm from entering the country, and that is why we must ensure, ma'am, that the root causes are addressed. It wouldn't stop a single weapon from being smuggled through the ports. It does not disrupt a single trafficking network. So the first line of defense against illegal firearms, in my view, may not be the courtroom, but I'm not against having a firearm division. And I know that the Minister of Criminal Justice just heard that. So I'm not against having the firearm division, not at all. All I'm saying is that once it is well justified, that is fine to society. Because my job here is to be the voice of the people. And if the voice of the people is one that is saying that they want justification, then I'm here to ask the questions, whether I want to like it or not. So, I know, sir, that it would take full societal efforts for this. It is prevention, it is intelligence, it is border security, it is enforcement. Yes? So I listened carefully to the submissions of the Honourable Minister, and I made sure this morning I didn't even interrupt him once, see? So he did spoke about proper records, talk about the ballistic experts, talk about the investigators, he talked about timely disclosures, mentioned evidence management. I noted it here that he talks about the improved case preparation. So I agree with those observations. And, sir, all of those can be regarded as reasons for a better resource justice system also. All of those reasons could still fit into the analogy by persons in society, that all of those could still fit in to bettering a criminal justice system. So, sir, indeed, the government did inform us that hundreds of firearm files have already been prepared, so we can look out for them. Additional prosecutors have been assigned, additional judges are being appointed, and a backlog reduction unit has been established. Disclosure practices will be improved. So, Mr. President, those are precisely the measures that would produce efficiency. So we have to make that clear to anyone sitting at home and watching Parliament today. Those are things that would improve efficiency. So, but it does raise another question here. If these are the reforms that will reduce delays, sir, why then could they have not been implemented under the criminal justice system? I still want the minister to just, for those who have any existing queries, to just clarify that. So, sir, I have heard the argument that justice delivered quickly is the best form of crime prevention. So there's force in that proposition. But speed alone does not measure justice. This I've learned from practice. There's a lot more to measuring justice than just having matters done speedily. And I will use a quote from Lord Hewart, and just the quote. He said, "It is not merely of some importance, but it is of fundamental importance that justice should not only be done, but should manifestly and undoubtedly be seen to be done." Yes, so the administration of justice must therefore be guided not only by urgency, but also by evidence. See, so the criminal lawyers that practice daily, they would know that quote by a roll off the tongue. But comparative experience should also caution us against assuming that the creation of a specialized court by itself is a solution. And I took notes from Jamaica, and my notes showed that there was a classic example in Jamaica. The court was established with the objective of ensuring the swift and effective disposition of firearm matters. Yet, over time, Jamaica discovered a reality that all governments eventually confront. They recognize that specialization alone does not eliminate delay. So when you're believing that, okay, there's a specialized court and all delays, regardless if there's anybody out there, I believe so, it doesn't just happen like that. Because I'm telling you, as soon as the bill is passed, people are going to be of the view thinking, okay, no more delays. The government passed this bill and, you know, there's not going to be any delays since this gun court is established. But that's not what happens. But I would say, and reiterate what the government minister said, in that I appreciate that you can still have the trial by the judge, and you can still have the trial by the jury. Because according to the Jamaican Act, the Gun Court Act of 1974, they removed that ability to have the trial by the jury. But here in Barbados, we're not removing that aspect, which is good, because people still appreciate having trials by jury. It is still really good to have members of society come in and give their verdict and their view. For those who don't appreciate having a judge alone trial. So specialization alone does not create the efficiency, sir, and specialization alone does not solve the problem of capacity. So backlogs can emerge in specialized courts, and that is basically what I'm saying. You can still have backlogs. There can be still instances where backlogs could occur. So even if you've heard the government ministers standing and reminding us that, this is to deal with a lot of the backlog issues, I'm here to remind you that based on such a comparable jurisdiction like Jamaica, where even though they established a specialized court, there were still backlogs, there is still the possibility of backlogs happening in Barbados. We are just another island, another country, but sometimes we share some of the same issues that can occur. So we have to make provision, of course, to increase the necessary staff at any time, because we don't know if there will be a higher surge in the gun-related crimes. There is that possibility. Tomorrow we could wake up and there could be 20 gun-related offenses. We just don't know. We don't know time. We don't know the hour. Everything, I am a believer, is in God's hands. So we don't know what will happen, but we have to prepare so that if there's a spike, a greater increase, that we can always have the staff complement that will be there to accommodate these gun-related cases. So there's a lesson to learn from Jamaica, and that is not to say that the specialized courts do not work. The lesson is that specialized courts cannot substitute for proper management, adequate resources, and effective administration. So, I am here to remind this chamber that even though some of you may be greatly excited about this bill, please don't underestimate the fact that issues can follow and that we must make preparation for the unexpected. So, I want to remind the chamber again and more forcefully that firearm offenses are not the only offenses that need addressing, and they are not the only cases which have much delay in our country. Civil litigants are waiting for years for judgments. They're waiting long. I know of personal injury matters where litigants have been waiting since 2004. I know of cases where there might be even further outstanding matters that surpass that time limit. So a lot of estate matters still remain unresolved. So I know that sometimes in society, there will be Barbadians that will say, wait, but what's going on is just all about gun-related crime. We know that gun-related crime is a serious matter, but I've been waiting for a long time. I've had backlog with my civil matter. I've had backlog with my estate matter. So the government should not forget that these people are out here needing their matters to be seriously addressed and not to be undermined. So the Caribbean Court of Justice has on more than one occasion expressed concern regarding delays in the administration of justice across the region and including Barbados. I believe that they're coming to the point where they're losing that tolerance for seeing that there's so many backlog, and even the judges sometimes get frustrated. The judges want to know that these cases are off of their desks. Many times the judges just sometimes even encourage the parties to see best, especially when it comes to civil matters, how they can negotiate, how they can settle matters by mitigation. Everything is not always a court matter. Sometimes things are addressed during mediation, sorry, sir. So the citizen waiting 10 years for a civil judgment does experience also injustice no less than the accused waiting years for a criminal trial. So, sir, bills as such, they don't and won't provide no measurable benchmarks by which Parliament can assess success. So in this bill, when you read it, we can't assess the success, and I don't expect it to. So we can only hold on to the assertions given by the government that the firearm matters could be completed within 4 to 6 weeks, and that there would be speedy trials. All of those are just assertions that we will have to hold on to. And there's a relationship of trust there, because if they say it, I know that the public is going to want to, there will be an expectation that what you see is what you get, and what you say is what you will give to the public. So this legislation, it will not set targets, but we must ensure that the administration does set targets and that they keep their word. So if we have proper reporting, and that is my suggestion, to have proper reportings that can help build the public confidence, where we will have the periodic reports published, and we can give these reports back to the public to let them know the success of the establishment of the gun court even after it is established. I think that all of that helps to build public trust in the community, where there's someone there employed to do the reports and to let society know, look, we've said that these cases will be done within this time period, and so far in this report we can show that this is how the cases have been addressed within the time slots and what's not, so that then that could build trust with society, and it could rest assure them that we're not just here talking and just implementing things, and opposition senator, independent senator, the whole mix. We're just here to just go along with anything. But when things are passed through the House of Assembly and through the Senate, it is well justified. So, sir, all of that I said to ensure that surely there would be accountability. Surely there should be evidence. I always believe in things being evidence-based. So once we have that evidence in the reports, even after a court as such, with this new division is established, that will show how efficient the establishment was. So the Privy Council gave us such a great reminder, and I hope that everyone here will hold on to that reminder for the future. So the government has repeatedly told us that this new firearm division will move cases through the system rapidly, sir. The Prime Minister did also suggest that firearm cases should ideally be completed within 4 to 6 weeks, and certainly within the 3 months. And the Minister today of Legal Affairs did assure us that hundreds of files are already prepared and ready to be brought before the court. And if all of this is correct, and for the purposes of argument, let us assume that it is correct, have we considered the impact on the correctional system or the prisons? I didn't hear him once. He's talking a lot in my left ear, but I didn't hear him once talk about the prison service, and he could correct me if I'm wrong. But
just for the formality as well as for the record, by him you mean the Honourable Minister of Legal Affairs?
yes, sir.
Yes, that would help, so that there are many different gentlemen here.
The Honourable Minister of Legal Affairs
Yes.
and Criminal Justice.
Yes, please, thank you.
So that is why I want to focus now on the aspect of how it would affect the prisons, because it can happen. If we're in here, we're talking about speedy trials and so on. I know the non-lawyers will wonder where I'm going with this, but I will get there. So it extends beyond a criminal justice system does not end at conviction, and that is my essential point. It extends beyond the courtroom, sir, to the prison gates. It extends beyond the courtroom to the prison gates. It would be good to acknowledge the percentage of prison occupancy, because overcrowding can pose issues if we are speedily sending people to the prisons, and the prisons must also be equipped to facilitate any high surge in crime. Remember, sir, that when I'm speaking now, I'm not just talking about the present, I'm looking at the future. I'm looking at what can happen tomorrow. There are many countries like the United States that don't know what happened tomorrow. Sometimes they wake up and then you see some crazy gun shooting happen, where it happens where it's not only one person that is committing the crime. Look at campus trains. So when you have campus train, it wasn't one person that was walking in there to commit no crime. So it could be a crowd, it could be a group. We talk about anti-gang legislation. The word gang itself shows you that it's not one person. So then we have to look at that aspect of overcrowding in the prisons. So if the firearm court succeeds in dramatically increasing the number of firearm prosecutions, the convictions, the sentences, sir, then a corresponding increase in the prison population may follow. And I am saying, has government assessed the likely impact on the prison system? Have we been provided with any projections regarding the number of additional inmates that may result from the expedited firearm prosecutions? Has any assessment been undertaken regarding accommodation, staffing, rehabilitation programs, and correctional resources? Those are my questions before the Honourable Senate today, sir. Because if the government expects a significant increase in convictions through expedited proceedings, what planning has been undertaken for that correctional system? So, Mr. President, an efficient court system cannot exist in isolation from an efficient correctional system. So my point here is one bottleneck removed may simply sometimes create another. So you have to prepare for that. So yes, there would be accused persons that would end up being found guilty, because remember I said earlier that you're innocent until you're proven guilty. But of course, if many persons are found guilty, they're not going back at home. They're going to prison. So we still have to address that matter when it comes to looking at the overcrowding, even if we are talking about having a firearm division. And I'm only alluding to that fact because we're looking at how speedy the cases will happen. If we're saying it will happen in 3 to 4 months, you have a trial, and then someone is convicted and sentenced, then we have to address the prison factor, yes? So the objective should obviously not just be swift convictions, though that is good. We still have to look at these other factors. So the objective should be a coherent criminal justice policy that considers the investigation, the prosecution, the adjudication, the sentencing, the imprisonment, and the rehabilitation as part of the criminal justice system. So as the distinguished jurist Lord Bingham observes, he said, the rule of law is not a collection of isolated principles, but a coherent constitutional framework. So, Mr. President, if we are restructuring one part of that framework, we should satisfy ourselves that the other parts are prepared for the consequences that would occur and affect the members of society. And this leads me to another topic where I did hear the Minister of Criminal Justice and Legal Affairs was talking about referrals, but I know Legal Affairs and Criminal Justice, thank you. And I know, sir, that people will want to ensure that when it comes to any jurisdiction issues, that there would be no complication or duplication of matters, because when a man has a gun, he can have a gun, he could rape a woman. I heard the minister talking about rape. So we know that there's a broad definition there when it relates to the firearms and gun-related offenses, but if you have an individual who has a gun and he still rapes a woman, I know that all of society just wants to be rest assured that there's no confusion there. They just want to ensure that you're going to one court, witnesses going to that court, and the matter is dealt with in that court, and there's no confusion. And that is a fair request.
Point of order.
Yeah, what's the point of order?
Mr. President, just want to. Point of elucidation. And the member is also misleading the House with respect to the fact of counts. I think she's trying to say that if there's a firearm offense and there are other offenses, there will be delays and have to go to other courts, witnesses have to go to other courts. I think my other friend, the Well Service, she goes to the Firearms Act, which was amended, Section 3A, and it allows for joinder of counts in the indictment, which can then go to one court. So if there are other offenses related to the firearm offense, you have those counts in the same court. And you have one trial, basically, with those counts. Just want to inform my learned friend from the Friends of Democracy. Sorry, the opposition senators.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Thanks for the elucidation. Please continue, Senator Goodrich.
Thank you, sir, and I'm always in a good mood today, so I thank the Honourable Minister for his clarification. As you can see, I haven't responded to him with any of his antagonisms in the Senate for the whole day.
There is no such.
But
Honourable Senator, the way that the presiding officer, either myself or the Deputy President, will conduct our affairs, there can be no antagonism shown by an honourable senator to another. I'm sure that you will want to withdraw that reference to the Honourable Minister, who led the bill, will not have the antagonistic in any way.
Sir, yeah, she
yes.
corrected it. I said I was slight provocation, so I would have said that.
and so you withdraw any reference to any antagonism, and for sure provocation is permitted, but not antagonism.
Thank you, sir.
Please withdraw and proceed.
Thank you, sir. I withdraw that comment about antagonization. I would accept the one about provocation from the other Honourable Minister. So, sir, as I was saying, we want to ensure that in the minds of the people, they want to know that there be no confusion when it comes to how their matter will be dealt with, especially when there are complicated instances that would also include gun-related crimes, but still matters like, say, sexual offenses that involve gun crime. So, sir, that really concludes most of my concerns, and I would sum up to say that we just want to ensure that once this court is established, that the administrative process is one that will run efficiently, that it is properly staffed, it is properly allotted with the necessary technological infrastructure and the resources, and that there would be a decrease. And not just saying there would be a decrease, but there would be provision for the necessary and requisite reports to be provided so that we in society would have the necessary evidence to show that this establishment was definitely effective. So, sir, I say all that to say that I don't dispute at all the establishment of a firearm division, and I rightfully say that because I'm not going to say a gun court if the legislation does not allude to gun court in it. I will say I do support the establishment of this firearm court division. Thank you for my submission, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Goodrich. The Honourable Minister of Home Affairs. Oh, sorry. Senator Maladou.
Thank you, sir. I rise today to make a few comments. I want to start, sir, with saying that today is an extremely sad day for me, personally, to see this legislation before this Senate. I'm sad because of the need for this legislation. I think it is a sad day for all Barbadians that we've reached this point, that we need this. It's very sad that we find ourselves having to emulate other jurisdictions that are known for their high crime. So for that reason, I am sad that there is a need for this legislation. Very, very sad. I am going to speak very briefly, sir. I understand clearly the objectives, I believe, of this. I understand it. It is increasing our judicial capacity, and with your permission, sir, just look at my notes. I understand we are removing any reducing the delay in the firearm cases. I understand that the objective is to centralise the firearm-related offences, allow for flexible sittings and including electronic hearings, and ensuring that firearm cases can be moved efficiently from New Magistrates Court or other courts. All 5 of those objectives have my full and complete support, although I am sad that we need them. My only comments will come in 4 areas, which is to do with implementation. Because as I have said before, we suffer in this country and have been suffering for a long time on implementation deficit. And the 4 areas of implementation that we need to look carefully at with this particular bill, if it is going to be a success and address this burning problem that we have in Barbados, is firstly, the judicial appointments must match this policy. This bill permits up to 15 High Court judges, but that has only a practical benefit if in fact we appoint them and they are funded to do so. So that's the practical implementation that we need to follow very, very closely behind this. Secondly, it is only going to make any difference if the Firearms Court will need a clear case routing system. And I noticed that in the bill it says that it's up to the Chief Justice to direct such. I hope that that Chief Justice will be directing so quickly and can do so once those judges are appointed. Thirdly, the court infrastructure talked about by the Senator Goodrich, I think we should not get this lost in amongst other banter that is going on. The court infrastructure, they will need resources immediately for this to be implemented and to be successful. Passing this bill will do nothing if we don't put the resources behind it to do it. And fourthly, sir, the police and prosecution readiness, which I am pleased to hear that there are cases ready to go, and I look forward eagerly from tomorrow, if this bill is passed and then proclaimed, to see it happen. So, sir, those 4 things are what worry me about the implementation. But I will close my few comments with, I learned from Senator Niles, as he has spoken a number of times, I have learned from him, as I learned from most people in here. I have gone back to the appropriations bill to find then where I could see the money being set aside for this new endeavour. I could not find it. I can find it nowhere, and therefore I will pose this question to the Minister. Given that the 2026-2027 estimates show no increase in the statutory personal emoluments for the judicial judges line, where exactly is the funding for the additional High Court judges contemplated by this bill? I'm sure that the Honourable Minister, in his wrap-up, will be able to explain to us where that money is coming from. And sir, in closing then, as I often do, let me state two of my personal opinions on this wider matter. Firstly, I would like to call again what I think is necessary in terms of mandatory minimum sentencing for crimes committed with a firearm. I understand that there are some CCJ rulings or other things that need to be dealt with in order to have mandatory minimum sentences. I can't comment to that. What I can say is that if you asked Barbadians today, the vast majority would tell you that the sentences for crimes committed with firearms need to be much harsher than they are. So I would call for mandatory minimum sentences. And then I would leave the chamber with this question. The question is this: is it time for us as a country to consider the complete eradication of all guns in Barbados outside of the police, defence force and those kept safely and securely within sporting establishments? Should we, at the next opportunity, ask for a referendum if Barbadians would like to get rid of all guns in Barbados? Those few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Mallow. Honourable Attorney General.
Mr. President, I was present in this chamber when the Constitution Amendment in 2025 was passed. And though I had aspirations to go to another place, I did not contemplate at that time that if I had ever left here, I would have been back so soon. But it behoves me, acting in my capacity as Attorney General, to come to this chamber to join in the debate on the amendment of the Supreme Court of Judicature Amendment Bill under consideration, which makes provision for the establishment of a firearms division in the High Court of Barbados. And so I sat and listened with much enjoyment to the contributions made by my colleague, the Honourable Minister for Legal Affairs and Criminal Justice, and indeed the opposition senator who spoke. I want to begin, sir, by settling what I believe is a situation that we have had in the country. We have watched crime and violence change in its character and in its reach. We have watched the communities across this land, sir, carry burdens that the institutions that manage this situation have not been willing to name. And we have watched the regional conversation shift, because this is not a problem that exists only in Barbados, sir. This is a problem in which all regional countries are grappling with. And to be honest, sir, the geopolitical reality is that we bear a heavy price for having a hemispheric neighbor which manufactures guns and gives its citizens access to guns. The manufacturing of guns has resulted, sir, in what even the United States
department which manages alcohol and tobacco and firearms, have found to be a situation where over 75% of the guns in the Caribbean are linked to coming from the states of Florida and Georgia. Those are open carry states. That geographical and geopolitical reality cannot be lost on us as lawmakers. The problem that we have in the country, sir, is a problem that is region-wide. And as I've said, we have watched the conversation shift because you would happen to know that in a debate in the previous parliament, I made references, sir, to some of the calypsos that spoke to the gun challenges that we had in the 1990s, and indeed in the other place I did so as well. But over the 30, 40 years that we were dealing with too many guns in this town and too many guns passing around every day, I open the paper, all I read about is murder, it is pain to see, it is a shooting spree. That was 1993, sir. The conversation has now shifted at the policy level. And it's important for me to give the country the assurance that while all attention is being made to deal with this as a serious criminal justice issue, there are wider implications for how the state of Barbados is dealing with the problem. So we are shifting this discussion and not treating it solely, sir, as a criminal or a law enforcement problem, but treating it as a public health challenge. When I say public health challenge, we're not saying that in a trivial way, but sir, it is meant to deal with this problem like how we deal with public health challenges, requiring early intervention, coordinated responses, and sustained investment. CARICOM has made that commitment, sir, in the Needham's Point Declaration and in the George Bridge Declaration more recently in November 2024. Barbados was at the table, sir, and participated in that declaration. What does it mean for the country, sir? How do we take a public health approach to gun violence in the Caribbean? It is not just a policing and a criminal issue. And Senator Goodrich was right to raise the other issues because it is not only the prosecution of gun crimes, the sentencing of offenders, or their rehabilitation. It is much wider than that. But we must view it, like all public health challenges, as a preventable problem for the country. A preventable social and health problem that affects the lives of all individuals, families, and communities. It requires, therefore, that the government focuses, sir, on identifying the root cause of violence. What is the reason why so many young people in the country are turning to gun crimes? It means we have to look and examine the full profile of those persons committing these gun crimes. Because justice would require the prosecution of people before the courts. But effective justice, sir, would require that we ascertain the reason, the root cause of why these individuals are placed in the system. If we don't adopt the public health approach, I fear that we will continue to do what we have done since the early 1990s by creating stiffer penalties and not addressing the broad criminogenic and sociological issues that affect gun crime. So the government, sir, is committed to doing that. And I hope today to bring to the debate in this honourable chamber, sir, some of what the government is doing and what we are focusing on. Poverty, inequality, the exposure to trauma, early childhood traumatic experiences, lack of opportunities, all of the data, sir, points that if we are to attack the root of this problem, reduce the risk factors and strengthen the protective factors, we will break this cycle and deal with it as a public health challenge. We have to emphasize, sir, prevention through community programs, and the Honourable Minister of Legal Affairs and Criminal Justice has, as part of his ministerial mandate, the reduction of crime and crime prevention programs that they are rolling out within his ministry to deal with these root causes to crime. And it's easy, sir, to politicize these methods and methodologies. But all of the criminogenic studies that I have read in recent times point to what sociologists term as that paradigm between what is a social problem and a sociological problem. And that if we do not address the root causes within the context of the Caribbean, dealing with the inequality, dealing with the overcrowding in certain urban communities, sir, dealing with the low output within the education system, and also dealing with the challenge that we have in that we have an education system that is not necessarily geared towards the challenges that we have to meet in the current 21st century, where there is digital technology, artificial intelligence, and robotics, and all of these things are replacing the need for me to sit down in a classroom where a teacher is going to dictate notes on coffee in Brazil and cocoa in Ghana, and that I'm required to read those notes and come and do a test, and at the end of the term do an exam. That was how we were taught in 1986, and sir, it is my anecdotal evidence that is how my 13-year-old son is being taught in 2026. But that information, sir, the source of that information is not only within the head or the wisdom of the teacher's brains, but it's also widely available in digital technology. And that if we don't adapt our education system, we are not only going to fail in bridging the gap that is producing the 75% of the people who are coming out every year without any certification, we are also going to create a digital divide as a result of the failure to transform the education system. These are structural problems, sir, that the country must confront. And that is what the government is committed to do. We also have to treat gun violence like a disease that can be studied, that can be prevented, managed. Governments and communities have to work collaboratively to reduce the harm and improve overall public well-being. That is what we mean when we say we are adopting a public health approach to this problem. So that this legislation alone, sir, is not the only measure that the government is implementing, sir. We have come to this chamber and in the other place in recent times and over the last couple of years to strengthen the systems that need strengthening. And I want to say, sir, that the creation of the Firearms Division of the High Court in Barbados, it is not a zero-sum game, and it can't be approached as a zero-sum game. Senator Goodrich, in her presentation to the Senate, suggested that if we do it this way, something else might suffer. Senator Marilu suggested that when he looked at the estimates, there was no provision for the gun court. Let me answer both of those queries or comments. Firstly, sir, the reason why the government took the decision not to add 2 more judges in the criminal court was because when we looked at the impact of firearms on the society, that we needed a more targeted response at the level of our court system. And the kinds of resources that are necessary to establish and support the prosecution and the management of cases within the High Court required a level of specialization that was justified. The same way in which the criminal division exists, the family division exists, the civil division exists, the commercial division exists, where there are specialties within the system. Not every judge has a background that would allow them to work in all of the divisions of the court. Not every lawyer does. The Honourable Minister who spoke was the first person, sir, that gave me a case to do in the courts. It was a criminal case. But, sir, you and I know that I did very little criminal law. It was not my area of specialty. So that the decision to create a specialty court, and I hope that in my presentation I would explain why that is necessary, was a decision that was not taken lightly. It was a decision that was taken because of the need to ensure that we have the right people, the right resources, targeting a problem. If we are taking this by way of a public health approach, going to the root of the problem, and using our resources collectively as a community to deal with it, sir. So it's expected, sir, that if you have a dedicated court, you'll be able to deal more quickly and effectively with firearm-related offenses. This is a major reform of our court system, and it has implications for citizen security and also the penal system, which in my ordinary ministerial portfolio I have responsibility for. But sir, I want to speak first to how we are seeking to enhance citizen security. I will speak to the benefits as well as the impacts of violence. And I have gone through about 8 or 9 different ways in which this change in the legislation will enhance citizen security and how it will impact on the operation of our penal system. Gun crimes, sir, get delayed in the general court system, and that is a fact, due to the backlog and the competing priorities of the system. Especially where the case may be a gun possession case, where there is no violence or no other offense attributed to that particular offender before the court, or accused person before the court. But we will know, sir, that that gun does not shoot itself, or does not only operate within one offense or no offense involving violence. So a gun out there in the possession of a person can bring someone before the court. But when we have violent crimes like burglaries, robberies, assaults, attempted murder, and even murder, those offenses tend to get a priority within the system, sir. A dedicated firearms division would allow the judges and the court staff to focus more specifically on gun-related offenses. And that is intended to reduce the delay in bringing the cases to trial and in adjudicating the matters. So this will bring some benefits. A dedicated division prioritizing the firearm offenses, ensuring quicker trials, quicker sentencing, being able to effectively deal with how these people can be rehabilitated if that is an option or the optimal choice for the post-sentence treatment of that offender. One of the other benefits, sir, as I said, is to reduce the backlog of those gun-related cases. And it also provides the opportunities for the investigators to determine whether or not that particular offender's participation in other crimes is a relevant thing to investigate. The Honourable Minister spoke about the plea bargaining and how that piece of legislation is allowing the police to be able to solve crimes by way in which persons in the system are giving assistance to the police in other matters. But if we get them before the courts, we can have the system moving. When offenders perceive there's a higher likelihood, sir, of conviction, the deterrent effect of the law is strengthened, in my view. How does this impact on violence, sir? Swift justice increases deterrence. Offenders are less likely to commit the offenses when the punishment is timely. And it will prevent the repeat offenders, sir, from staying on the streets while the cases drag on in the system. So when we came to office, sir, there were 2 criminal courts operating in Barbados. And our murder rate has not grown exponentially since over the last 5-6 years. It has gone up and down almost at a consistent level. We've had a spike in 2019, I believe, and one last year. Based on current trajectory, we would probably be level out where we were last year as well. But we hope that it can go down, and these measures will help it to go down, sir. But the truth is, sir, we have too many people in the system already who are charged with gun crimes, but the system could not adjudicate their cases, and they're on 2 and 3 charges. We found that in 2018. We increased it to 8. But it's not only a quantitative approach in terms of increasing the numbers, but it's what we do by the creation of this firearms division. The second point I want to make, sir, in addition to enhancing the citizen security, sir, is improving the accountability for violent crime. The firearms are linked to shootings and gang activity in the country, armed robberies, and organized criminal networks. A specialized firearm division develops the expertise in ballistics evidence, in the digital and forensic evidence that would have to be marshaled before the court, and in those prosecutors and the judges, and indeed the criminal defense attorneys, will get some more experience in dealing with complex criminal enterprises. We are seeing, sir, the complex nature of criminal enterprises being planned not only within Barbados, but being planned within the region, and even in Latin America, affecting situations on our shores. And therefore, it requires Barbados to be part of a regional framework of investigations, a regional framework of monitoring and security evaluation, sir. Not only the police going knocking on a house in a district, so that this specialization can improve the quality and consistency of the judicial decisions. Another reason why the country should feel confident in this approach to the establishment of a firearms division, sir, is that there will be some improved case management and efficiency within the system. It is expected that this division will integrate modern case management systems tailored to gun crimes. This will produce the benefit of better coordination between the police and prosecutors, forensic labs, and the judiciary, cutting down the time frame in which the cases go through the system. Just like, sir, if by way of analogy, and it may be a poor analogy if you had to look at it, but an experienced family judge, an experienced family lawyer, and the lawyers on both sides are able to look at a case on paper, and the child care experts who might be required, or the welfare officers who are required to attend the court to address the matter, can look at a file and map out a structure and a framework as to how the case will proceed through the system, and deal with it in a way where a judge or a lawyer who is not accustomed to dealing with it may not be able to grasp the issues. And that happens all the time. Some lawyers smile when we see some people walk into the court because they don't have any experience in the matter. and you might be able to take a little more advantage of them than a seasoned practitioner in the area. These are issues that we feel that will not bedevil the system because there's a level of specialty that will be required in a firearms division. Early identification of the evidentiary gaps and the faster preparation of cases. Prosecutors now will be trained in all of the things that are necessary to bring a case before a firearms division in a way that they would not if they were having a much more general practice. And law requires specialties, sir. And this is what we are looking for. How will this impact our violence? Higher conviction rates since cases are better prepared and are likely to collapse, less likely to collapse. It also builds the public confidence in the justice system by encouraging people in the community to cooperate. Another area, sir, why the public should support this bill, sir, is the enhanced handling of the technical evidence. As I said, these cases will require the judges, the prosecutors, the police to rely heavily on forensic and ballistic analysis. Judges and prosecutors now have to be trained. People can print 3D guns. People can break down guns in components and import them. And if your customs and border officials are not aware of all of these developments, then you have serious problems. A judge must be able to read a ballistic report that has special information in it or technical information, highly technical information. The judges will undergo the training, but the training also has to be ongoing because the system, the criminal system that operates is not static. Dealing with gunshot residue, projections, and where the shooter started and how they escaped. All of this is special evidence of a nature, quality, and kind that requires, or that I would dare say, the country will feel more assured if a specialist judge and a specialist court is dealing with this. It will reduce the misunderstanding and the misinterpretations of scientific evidence because of the specialist nature of the judges. Some people might say, well, sir, why don't you have a specialist court for sexual offenses? Why don't you have a specialist court for financial crimes? It is the judgment of this government, sir, that we need a specialist court for firearms in the country. How will this impact on violence, sir? In this regard, stronger prosecutions lead to more successful convictions of serious offenders, and we will disrupt the illegal gun networks more efficiently by having a better command of the technical evidence. Sir, this legislation will also facilitate a greater consistency in sentencing. A specialized court will develop its own standardized approaches for firearm offenses, and is less likely because it is all good and well, and one of the reasons why the courts have consistently restrained Parliament or not listened to Parliament in trying to direct how an offender is treated at conviction is because we operate under the system of the rule of law. May I answer Senator Maliunu, but he's not in the seat at this point in time, but I hope he can hear me. Every individual who comes before the court requires that their case be heard and adjudicated on the merits. And what the courts have consistently said is that the laws are made by Parliament, but they are enforced by the courts. And you can place penalties in the law, but Parliament does not sentence. That is why minimum sentences have been struck down by the court as unconstitutional, because it brings in a level of arbitrariness. And individuals, the judge who hears the case, is not able to tailor the sentence specifically for the individual who is before the court. Individualized sentencing is a human right. And while Senator Goodrich likes to quote all the English law lords, I happen to have learned and taught law at the University of West Indies, and I'm proud of the Caribbean jurisprudence. And I can take the opportunity to quote, and I believe Senator Rogers is accustomed by now for hearing part of this quotation. But it's a quotation about the rule of law, sir, coming from the late Mr. Justice Jacob Witt, one of the first judges of the Caribbean Court of Justice. And this was a quotation that he gave in the famous case of Boyce and Joseph, which effectively abolished the mandatory death penalty. Not the death penalty, the mandatory death penalty, which removed any discretion of the trial judge to impose a sentence by Parliament saying it must be the only penalty. But he said that he was speaking in relation, sir, to the rule of law, and this is important because, yes, what Senator Malulu is saying might be the popular sentiment on the ground that the gun crimes require stiff sentences and a judge should not have the option of a light sentence or even a fine. But constitutional rights are not majoritarian. The majority does not determine the rights you hold under the Constitution. A lot of people don't understand that. Because the day the majority determines your rights, it means that when you are in the minority, you will have no rights. So constitutional rights, sir, are actually counter-majoritarian. And that is why the courts, in interpreting these rights, have jealously guarded any incursions on the rule of law. And what Justice Witt spoke to is the multi-layered concept of the rule of law that establishes first and foremost that no person, not even the Queen or her Governor General, is above the law. It further imbues the Constitution with other fundamental requirements such as rationality, reasonableness, fundamental fairness, and the duty and ability to refrain from and effectively protect against abuse and arbitrary exercise of power. So that the court is very serious about that. And you can unpack all of that language to suggest that the day that Parliament starts to take away the discretion of a sentencing court and ascribe it unto itself, you will find that those sentences are struck down by the courts, which will jealously guard this fundamental concept of the rule of law. It is clear that the concept of the rule of law is closely linked to and broadly embraces concepts like the principles of natural justice, procedural and substantive due process of law, and its corollary, the protection of the law. And this is my favorite part of this quote. It is obvious that the law cannot rule if it cannot protect. Sir, this legislation allows the government to more target organized crime and gun trafficking. Gun violence is frequently linked to organized gangs and crimes and illegal firearms importation. Sir, I'm not at liberty in this space, sir. I do apologize to Senator Goodrich to go into the details of how the country's borders are being enhanced and secured, but I give the country the assurance that we have taken that very seriously, and in the estimates you will see approved provision is made to enhance our borders in a way where previously, sir, we had no scanners at the ports for a long period of time. Sir, this legislation will increase the confidence of the public in our justice system because it demonstrates that the government has an ability to respond effectively to violent crime. We are putting the resources in place, sir, to make sure not only the judges are there, and to answer Senator Malibu's point, you cannot make provision in the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the current financial year for something that does not exist in the law. At March 31st, there were 13 judges of the High Court. This bill requires 2 more, paid with the same salaries as all of the existing judges of the High Court. But the government, having won the election, sir, could not put into the estimates provision for payment of 2 more judges when there was no basis for them to exist in the law. So the estimates are not only arithmetical, financial, and accounting measures, there also is a legal element to them. And therefore, I would have thought that an experienced senator like Senator Malley would have appreciated the relevance of a supplementary. Once the law is passed, the supplementary will come to Parliament for the provision of expenditure to establish the gun court. Not only the judges, but the staff that is there. Sir, I would not have enough time to go into the implications for the penal system, which is really my substantive ministerial portfolio. But suffice to say, sir, that this country will see, before the end of the financial year, changes in our penal system. You will see new legislation governing the prison, changing the approach from just housing people in a detention to the rehabilitation and the reintegration of people into society. Too many people who are in our prison have had either family members who were in prison, high percentages, or have been in prison themselves. So there's a high level of recidivism. But if we do not put measures in place to rehabilitate those persons in the system, and also how to reintegrate them into society, we are not going to deal with this in a public health approach, as is the intention of government. We also have to have the off-ramp programs, the diversionary programs. Those young people who might be caught up with trying to get street credit and go and get a gun and go and commit an offense to get stripes on the block. How are we going to divert them? How are we going to rehabilitate them within the system? That is equally important because, as I said, and I will close on this point, Mr. President, this legislation deals with justice, putting a system in place to deal effectively with what is a national scourge. But equally effective justice will require us to deeply examine how these people came to be within the system in the first place. That is the public health approach that the government has taken. And this legislation, along with the other measures that the government have taken and will take in dealing with crime prevention, shows that we are on point to meet our obligations that we gave as a commitment in the George Bush Declaration. Sir, with those words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you very much. Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this sitting of the Senate be suspended for lunch until 3 p.m. in the afternoon.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 3 p.m. today. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The sitting is suspended until 3 p.m. today.